Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going way back, immersing ourselves in the really high-stakes, formative era of Bill Gates.
Yeah.
This is long before the global foundations, before the philanthropy focus.
Mm-hmm.
We're dialing back to when he was, well, essentially just a young man,
Hmm.
incredibly ambitious and absolutely laser-focused on building a software dynasty.
That's absolutely the mission today. We're aiming to unpack those critical early moments, the ones that didn't just, launch Microsoft, but really cemented its dominance in the whole computer revolution.
Yeah.
And we're focusing, like you said, specifically on Gates's, his core insight about software standardization, controlling that standard, and of course, the legendary IBM deal. Bit of a high-wire act, really, based on the source material we have.
It really is. It's this story of a fiercely brilliant programmer, someone who saw a future almost nobody else did, but also driven by this raw, sometimes pretty volatile ambition.
Yeah, the sources definitely paint that picture.
A lot of contradiction, right? The man who'd later tackle huge global problems was, back then, defined by this almost aggressive refusal to ever give ground.
A kind of chaotic brilliance, you could say. And those early moments, they didn't just define Gates, they shaped the entire Microsoft culture. So, yeah, to understand the giant, we really need to understand the intensity of the boy genius.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's dig into those early character traits, the youthful exploits that kind of set him on this path. Right off the bat, the sources paint this picture of Gates having a definitive hacker mindset. And that wasn't just being keen on tech.
Yeah.
It was entanglement with what our material calls computer exploitation. That sounds pretty serious for a teenager.
Absolutely. And you have to place it in context, right? Late 60s, early 70s, computers weren't like today. They were massive mainframes, super expensive.
Right, not on every desk.
Not at all. So Gates and his friends, Paul Allen included, they were just obsessed with getting time on these things.
And the specific target was this machine, the PDP-10 at Computer Center Corporation. C-Cube, they called it.
That's the one.
Why that machine? What was so special about it? And why push the limit so hard?
Well, the PDP-10 was a time-shared system, lots of users at once, but time was incredibly expensive, thousands of dollars an hour, potentially,
Wow.
for a high school kid. Unlimited access was, it was the holy grail. So they got caught finding ways around the system, basically exploiting security holes to get free computing time.
Stealing time,
Yeah.
essentially.
And they weren't just messing around playing games. They were digging deep, debugging, really pushing the OS to its limits, trying to understand it.
And there were real consequences for this digital delinquency. They got caught, banned for 6 weeks.
A full 6 weeks.
But it got more serious.
Yeah.
They were told next time the police would be involved. Their activities were actually illegal.
That's right.
The sources say the boys were very contrite after that warning. Makes you realize how high the stakes were, even back then.
It really does. It shows that even really young, the line between, let's say, intellectual curiosity, maybe penetration testing, and just breaking the rules, it was pretty blurry for Gates.
He just saw the system as a puzzle.
A challenge to be beaten,
Yeah.
regardless of the rules the adults set up.
And there's this perfect little anecdote, almost prophetic, about his very first program on that PDP-10.
Oh, yeah, that one's great. His first basic program, he just called it Bill. Simple enough.
Okay.
But the next time he tried to load it, the whole system crashed. The entire PDP-10 mainframe.
Wow. His first program took down the whole thing.
Think about that. His earliest little creation had enough, accidental power, I guess, to halt this multi-million-dollar corporate machine. Kind of captures that early mix, doesn't it? This raw genius mixed with a bit of powerful disruptive chaos.
That chaotic brilliance, as you called it, soon found its way into the professional world. And it definitely came with that intense, competitive edge, sometimes maybe too intense. It manifested as volatility.
Oh, absolutely. We've got documented evidence of a pretty serious temper that sometimes really became a liability for the business.
Like that story with the Intel subsidiary.
Exactly. There's this anecdote. Yeah. Gates and a colleague are on this important conference call with an Intel subsidiary. They're talking about a potential deal.
High stakes, presumably.
Very. But Gates apparently got furious. Not about the deal they were discussing, but about a bad delivery reference Microsoft had received from a completely different division within Intel.
Okay, so not directly related to the call.
Not at all. And in professional talks, you got to manage that stuff, right? Keep your cool.
Okay.
But the sources say Gates just let his temper flare unchecked. His colleague, who usually ran interference, couldn't jump in fast enough.
And the result?
The outburst just completely blew the deal. Lost it.
So that intensity could clearly backfire? Was it ever an asset, do you think, that volatility? Well, in that case, clearly not. It cost him a contract. But, the underlying intensity, that refusal to accept anything less than perfect or absolute adherence to what was agreed, that definitely became a core part of Microsoft's later success. It drove incredibly high internal standards.
And that focus on function, on intensity, it shaped how Microsoft was structured internally too, right? Gates wasn't big on fancy titles.
Not at all. He famously ran a very flat hierarchy, hated corporate bloat. He apparently used to joke that too many companies handed out VP titles like water to lambs, just devalued them.
Huh, okay. So what was important then?
Function over status. This is really key. Gates made sure the most critical jobs at Microsoft were the program managers.
Program managers.
Not VPs.
Exactly. Their power wasn't in the title. It was in their responsibility for the product specifications. They wrote the blueprint. They decided what the software would do, how it would work, how it interacted with the OS.
So more than just coordinating a project, they were the actual architects.
Precisely. If Gates's big goal was controlling the standard, like we talked about, then the program managers were the ones enforcing that standard right there in the design specs. They were the gatekeepers of the product's soul, in a way.
That makes sense. That laser focus on the specs, the code's fundamental design, it shows he understood early on that real power came from setting the definition of good. Or maybe just setting the definition of standard.
Yeah, exactly. Controlling the baseline. And that fierce internal drive, that focus, it translated directly into how the rest of the industry saw Microsoft. Their reputation became, well, formidable.
The sources used strong language.
Yeah.
Competitors didn't just see Microsoft as competition. They feared him.
And that fear was strategically useful, you could argue. The material suggests nobody in the industry made a big move without thinking, okay, what's Microsoft's counter going to be?
That's real influence.
It is. And the resentment was apparently so palpable. There's that incredible story, almost shocking, really. Microsoft actually got booed when they won an award at a software dinner.
Booed at an awards dinner.
Yeah. That's not just friendly rivalry. That's deep-seated animosity, probably fueled by that fear of their growing power.
And a big part of that fear wasn't just market share, was it? It was Gates's knowledge. The sources say he knew an astonishing amount about his rivals.
It seemed almost uncanny to people at the time. He apparently amazed industry folks with how much he knew about what was going on inside Apple and IBM, right up to the highest levels.
Like he had inside sources everywhere.
It gave that impression, yeah. One person was quoted saying it felt like nothing happens within IBM without his knowledge, and that he knows everything going on at Apple. Whether that was literally true or just the perception, it was powerful. It wasn't just gossip. It was constant, high-level strategic analysis by the CEO himself.
And he wasn't just tracking products. He was looking for strategic weaknesses, which leads to that really bold prediction he apparently made.
Ah, yeah, the IBM prediction.
He believed IBM, Big Blue, the titan of the era, would fold in 7 to 10 years.
Which sounds audacious now, and it was certainly audacious then, but it shows his strategic thinking. He saw that the rigid, mainframe-centric culture of giants like IBM just wasn't built for the fast, messy, software-driven world of the personal computer. He saw their structure as their fatal flaw.
And his deep knowledge let him predict where they'd stumble.
Exactly. So you've got this picture of the external Gates, feared, maybe borderline omniscient, intense, driven.
Right. But then there's this great little detail that brings it back down to earth about the early, maybe slightly chaotic internal culture. The hiring of Miriam Lubo in 1977.
Oh, Miriam Lubo, yeah. She's a fantastic anecdote. Microsoft was still pretty small then, very intense startup vibe. They hired her as a secretary.
And she was kind of an outsider.
Completely. She was 42, a mother of 4, knew nothing about computers, nothing about software. She basically became the office den mother, trying to impose some order on these young, brilliant, probably quite messy programmers.
And the anecdote.
It perfectly captures the culture clash. Shortly after she started, she apparently rushed over to a colleague, totally panicked.
What a habit.
She reported that some kid had just zipped past her desk, barged into Mr. Gates's office, and was messing around with the computer terminal in there.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The colleague, a guy named Wood, had to gently break it to her.
Let me guess.
That the kid was, in fact, Mr. Gates himself.
Oh, that's perfect.
Isn't it? It speaks volumes. Despite the fearsome external reputation, the high-level strategy, internally, he was still just this intensely focused programmer buzzing around, obsessed with the machine, still blurring that line between CEO and coder.
Which actually transitions us perfectly into the next phase, the single biggest event of his early career, the one built entirely on that youthful nerve and focus.
No.
Okay, so now we get to it. The absolute centerpiece of the Microsoft origin story. The moment that took them from being, a successful company selling programming languages into the actual gatekeepers of the PC world, the IBM deal.
This is where everything changes.
And where that strategic knowledge we talked about meets pure, unadulterated audacity.
The context is just crucial here. It's July 1980. IBM announces the System 23 machine, also known as the Data Master.
And this was a big deal.
Huge! It totally blindsided the business press. It signaled that IBM, the king of the giant mainframes, was serious about getting into the personal computer game, this new decentralized computing world.
Right. Big Blue stepping onto Apple's turf, Radio Shack's turf. The pressure on IBM must have been immense.
Enormous. Businessweek magazine at the time noted that everyone expected IBM to introduce a low-cost PC to compete directly with Apple and Tandy's Radio Shack models. They couldn't afford to mess this up or be slow about it.
And that need for speed created a problem for them, didn't it? A big one.
The biggest one. They needed an operating system, an OS to run this new machine, and they either weren't set up to build one fast enough themselves, or they just chose not to focus their internal resources there.
So they look outside.
Initially, yes. They went to the company that had the leading OS at the time, Digital Research, or Docker.
Makes sense.
But Docker, well, the accounts vary slightly, but whether it was arrogance or maybe just missing the sheer scale of the opportunity, they essentially blew it. They wouldn't agree to IBM's very strict non-disclosure terms, or maybe their price was too high, whatever the reason.
The door slammed shut.
Exactly. Leaving this huge vacuum. IBM needs an OS, and the main provider is out.
Okay.
And IBM, specifically their lead negotiator on this project, a guy named Jack Sams, he saw an opportunity in Bill Gates' known ambition, his drive.
So they pivoted to Microsoft, even though Microsoft was known for languages like BASIC, not operating systems.
Precisely. And that's the genius of IBM's move, maybe, and certainly the stage for Gates' audacious response. Sams basically just dumped the problem right onto Gates' desk.
How do you mean?
The sources are clear. IBM's goal was to make it Microsoft's problem. Find an OS, secure it, integrate it, make it work, and crucially, do it on IBM's very aggressive timeline. They effectively outsourced their biggest strategic headache.
Wow. Okay, so IBM says, find us an OS. What makes this legendary is
Microsoft didn't have one. Not one suitable for the 16-bit Intel chips IBM planned to use. Nothing. Zero.
So Gates is agreeing to deliver a product he doesn't possess.
Essentially, yes. He was, as one source puts it, loath to let any contract get away. This was the ultimate poker game. He was betting the future of his company on a bluff.
He must have known how big this was. IBM entering the PC market would set the standard just by virtue of being IBM.
Absolutely. Control the OS on the IBM PC, and you potentially control the entire ecosystem that would spring up around it. But first, he had to deliver fast.
And this is where luck comes in. Or maybe sharp opportunism.
A huge dose of serendipity, certainly combined with ambition. He needed a 16-bit OS, and almost unbelievably, one had just been developed right nearby. By a programmer named Tim Patterson at a small company called Seattle Computer Products, or SCP.
Seattle Computer Products. Wait, Seattle.
Yeah, and the sources note SCP was located at maybe a 20-minute drive from Microsoft's offices at the time.
Get out. 20 minutes away.
It's almost staggering, isn't it? Not some complex international acquisition, a local product just down the road. Gates and Paul Allen moved incredibly quickly. They negotiated the purchase and the licensing rights for that SCP operating system.
And that OS was?
SCP called it QDOS for Quick and Dirty Operating System, apparently. Microsoft bought the rights, cleaned it up a bit, and renamed it MS-DOS, Microsoft Disk Operating System.
So that sequence, bluff IBM, find QDOS locally, practically next door, acquire it, license it back to IBM. That's the foundation.
That's the foundational moment. That's what put Microsoft on the map in a completely new way. But there's one more piece, the real masterstroke from Gates' side.
Which was?
The negotiation with IBM, maybe focused on speed, made a historically enormous error. They didn't demand exclusivity for the OS.
Meaning Microsoft could sell MS-DOS to other companies too.
Exactly. They allowed Microsoft to license MS-DOS to any other hardware manufacturer who wanted to build a PC.
Yeah.
And because IBM was IBM, everyone did want to build PCs compatible with theirs, the clones.
Compaq, Dell, Gateway, all of them later on.
All of them. Since they wanted to run the same software as the IBM PC, they needed MS-DOS. And Microsoft held the license. So Microsoft got a piece of practically every PC sold for decades.
Wow. Not just IBM's machines, but the entire market that followed IBM's lead.
It put Microsoft, a software company, right at the center. They weren't just selling a product to IBM, they were setting the standard for the entire industry. It guaranteed their role as the technological gatekeeper. You really can't overstate how huge that non-exclusive clause was.
If they had agreed to exclusivity, Microsoft's fate would have been tied just to IBM.
Completely. By keeping it non-exclusive, Gates achieved his vision almost instantly. The real power wasn't in the applications, definitely not in the hardware. It was in controlling that universal operating system standard that everything else relied on.
Okay, so Microsoft now has this incredible power, this central position, thanks to MS-DOS becoming the standard via IBM. The game shifts now, right?
Yeah.
From acquisition and bluffing to, well, defense.
Aggressive defense, yeah. They had the standard, and now the goal is to protect it at all costs, even if that meant actively working against competitors who might have had technically better products.
That proprietary view of software was really baked in from the start, wasn't it? They saw BASIC, the language they began with, as theirs.
Deeply ingrained. Gates's focus wasn't necessarily on fostering the best technology ecosystem overall. It was about making sure Microsoft's products, even if sometimes inferior, became the default. Standardization was the key, more so than pure innovation from others.
And this is where that fierce, maybe even ruthless competitive streak we saw earlier comes back, but now with enormous market power behind it.
Exactly. And there's a really stark, quite disturbing anecdote that illustrates this perfectly. It involves Apple and something called Mac Basic.
BASIC, developed by Apple.
Yes. Apple was obviously a huge competitor. They had developed their own version of the BASIC programming language for their Macintosh computer. And by all accounts, this version, created by a brilliant Apple programmer named Don Denman, it was really good.
Better than Microsoft's BASIC.
The sources say considerably better implementation, way ahead of what Microsoft was offering at the time for the Mac.
Okay, so Apple has a superior product. What does Gates do?
Gates, according to the sources, recognized its superiority immediately, and he felt threatened by it.
Threatened? Why? Competition's normal, isn't it?
Because if Apple shipped a clearly superior standard for programming on the Mac, it would lessen the need for Microsoft's own development tools on that very important emerging platform. It challenged Microsoft's role as the provider of the essential software tools.
It's about maintaining control of the standard again.
Precisely. So he used the leverage he now had. Remember, Microsoft wasn't just doing the OS, they were also making crucial applications for the Mac, like Multiplan, the precursor to Excel.
Okay.
Gates, as the sources put it, felt compelled to convince Apple not to ship MacBasic. And he succeeded. He essentially used the threat of withholding or delaying Microsoft's other vital Mac software to pressure Apple into killing their own superior project.
He strong-armed them into shelving their own better product.
That's what the source material indicates. It wasn't about which BASIC was technically better. It was about market control. If Apple shipped MacBasic, it would create a competing standard, potentially fragmenting the developer landscape on the Mac and weakening Microsoft's grip.
So his move ensured that the perhaps inferior Microsoft standard remained the baseline, even on Apple's own machine.
It prevented innovation from a competitor that could have challenged Microsoft's platform dominance. Technical quality took a backseat to maintaining that ubiquitous standard.
Wow, that's quite a move.
Oh.
But there's a human cost here too, isn't there? What about the programmer Denman?
Yeah, this is where it gets really tragic. Don Denman had poured himself into MacBasic, worked on it for 2 solid years.
His baby.
Totally. And when Apple management, under pressure from Microsoft, pulled the plug on the project, Denman was devastated, absolutely crushed. The sources say he described it as feeling like his 2-year-old child had been taken from him, just heartbroken.
That's incredibly rough.
And it gets worse. The sources state that, distraught over losing his work, Denman later crashed his motorcycle. Apparently, he was racing wildly through the foothills. He suffered very serious injuries.
Oh my God. Because of the project cancellation.
The implication is the distress was a major factor. The trauma, both emotional and physical, was so severe he ended up taking a 6-month leave of absence from Apple just to recover.
That's genuinely shocking. To see a strategic business decision ripple out and lead to that kind of personal disaster, it really underscores the intensity of the environment Gates was fostering.
It absolutely does. And that action, forcing Apple to kill MacBasic, it really cemented Microsoft's strategy moving forward. Use the power derived from controlling the operating system standard to ensure your software becomes the default, even if it means stifling innovation elsewhere that could threaten your control.
It's the ultimate example of the power he'd amassed, isn't it? The McBasic story feels like the endpoint of that philosophy we saw earlier. Control the spec, control the standard, control the market.
Exactly. It suggests Gates wasn't just playing to win. He was playing to control the rules of the game itself, even if those rules led to, well, highly questionable tactics and real damage to competitors and individuals. Hashtag tag tag outro.
So this deep dive has really illuminated that early formative Bill Gates,
Yeah.
an era just packed with competitive contradictions. We saw the hacker kid, the sometimes unchecked temper, but also the high-level strategist with his almost uncanny knowledge of his rivals.
Mm.
And it all culminated in that audacious IBM gamble, built on pure nerve, a bluff, really,
Yeah.
and then that incredibly quick opportunistic acquisition of Tim Patterson's OS.
And the real so what of it all, the core insight from Gates in this era seems to be his understanding that the ultimate power, the real long-term asset, wasn't just a clever application or some powerful hardware. It was absolute control over the operating system standard.
That was the key.
That was the key. The IBM deal, especially with that non-exclusive clause, delivered that control on a silver platter. It positioned Microsoft as the indispensable gatekeeper. It channeled that youthful, chaotic genius into building this rigid control through standardization.
It's quite a trajectory to trace, isn't it? From the kid crashing a mainframe with his first program to the corporate leader powerful enough to force a major rival like Apple to ditch a superior product simply because it threatened his company's dominance.
Yeah.
The IBM deal was undeniably a masterstroke of business savvy, of youthful nerve. But it immediately put him in a position where he had to exercise that power, leading directly to that fear and resentment we saw bubble up across the industry, like the booing incident.
So for you, the learner, maybe this brings up a really crucial question about what drives immense success. When you have that combination, deep technical knowledge and just raw, relentless ambition, the power that results often decides not just who wins the race, but who even gets to compete in the first place. Which leaves us with a final thought, something to chew on from this origin story. How much of Bill Gates' world-altering early success stemmed purely from his technical brilliance, his foresight about IBM's potential weakness, and how much came down to his absolute unyielding refusal to lose, no matter the competitive or even personal cost to others?